Henry, a man who seemed to have everything money could buy, spent his days in an immense silent mansion. From the outside, surrounded by vast fields and forests, the estate had an almost intimidating beauty. It was the kind of place that people looked at in awe from a distance, but rarely dared to approach. Inside, however, that mansion hid a deep and almost palpable pain. Years ago, Henry had lost what he loved most, his only son and daughter-in-law. A devastating car accident had taken them away, leaving a void that was impossible to fill. His granddaughter, Lily, survived, but the trauma was so great that she lost all her memories. The sweet, smiling girl who used to run through the halls of the mansion now wandered aimlessly, not even recognizing the grandfather who raised her with such love. Henry, who had always been a ruthless businessman, found himself powerless in the face of tragedy. All his wealth couldn't bring his family back or cure Lily of her amnesia. He hired the best doctors and specialists, but no one could make the girl remember who she was or her life before the accident. She lived in a constant state of confusion, as if she were trapped in an endless fog. The man used to spend hours sitting in his leather armchair in his office, a room that used to be his refuge. The walls, covered with shelves of books and expensive paintings, now only served to remind him of everything he had lost. He held a photo of his son, one of the few things he could still face without completely falling apart. "I failed you," Henry whispered to himself, looking at the portrait of his son with heavy eyes. "I should have done more." Despite his pain, Henry devoted himself to looking after Lily. He was always there, although he often felt helpless. He would see her sitting on the balcony, looking at the horizon, but he knew her mind was far away, lost somewhere he couldn't reach. "Lily," he called softly, coming closer, "do you want to go for a walk in the garden today?" The girl looked at him with a blank countenance, as if she couldn't recognize the person standing in front of her. After a few seconds, she simply shook her head in refusal and sank back into her silence. Henry sighed. As much as he wanted to see her get better, recovery seemed increasingly impossible. The nights were even worse. Henry often spent hours awake walking through the dark corridors of the mansion, feeling the weight of the absence of laughter and familiar voices. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional sound of the wind blowing against the windows. "I'd give anything to have them back," Henry would mutter to himself during these lonely walks. Anything. He knew that others saw him as a powerful and successful man, but the truth was that inside, he was broken. And what kept him going day after day was the desire to see Lily smile again, even if it was just once. Margaret, the housekeeper who had worked for him for decades, watched Henry's transformation with a mixture of concern and compassion. She knew he would never be the same, but she admired his determination to take care of his granddaughter, even with a broken heart. "Mr. Henry," Margaret approached him one evening as he gazed at the stars from his office window. "Miss Lily, she needs you, even if you can't say it." "I know, Margaret," he replied without taking his eyes off the sky. "But how can I help her when I don't even know how to reach her memories?" Margaret sighed, not having an answer to give. She knew that some wounds never heal completely. As the days dragged on, Henry tried to fill the emptiness by tending to the garden, walking around the estate and keeping to a routine so as not to lose himself in sadness. But no matter how hard he tried, the loneliness was relentless. He missed the sound of his son's voice, his daughter-in-law's soft laughter, and the cheerful conversations that had once filled the house with life. One morning, as Henry watched Lily playing quietly with a rag doll, the only thing that still seemed to bring the little girl any comfort, he felt overwhelmed by a deep sadness. Although he was by her side every day, it seemed that the distance between them was growing every moment. He no longer knew what to do to help her, to make her remember who she really was. If only she could remember. Just one thing. Anything, he thought in despair. Maybe that would bring her back. But the days remained the same, and Henry feared that this would be the new reality for the rest of their lives. A mansion full of silence and a granddaughter lost forever in her own mind. Even so, he refused to give up. That morning, as he did every day, Henry went for a walk in the woods around the mansion. The gentle wind rustled the leaves, and the sound of birds in the distance offered a temporary respite from the constant pain he carried. This was his moment of escape, an attempt to find some peace amidst the internal chaos that consumed him. The forest paths were already familiar, But that day, something different caught his eye. He noticed a movement among the trees, something unusual in that part of the estate. Approaching carefully, Henry spotted a small figure huddled between branches and dry leaves, barely camouflaged in a makeshift wooden shelter. It was a boy. Henry paused for a moment, surprised. The boy looked about 10 years old, thin and with worn-out clothes. His hair was disheveled and his face, covered in dirt, revealed the harsh reality he was living. The boy's frightened gaze met Henry's, as if he were preparing to flee at any moment. "Hey," Henry called softly, trying not to scare him. "What are you doing here?" The boy remained silent, his eyes wide like those of a cornered animal. But he didn't run. Perhaps he felt there was nowhere to run. "I don't want to hurt you, kid. I'm just curious. Are you lost?" The boy hesitated before shaking his head. "No," he replied in a low, almost imperceptible voice. "I live here, alone." Those words hit Henry like a punch in the gut. He knew what it was like to feel alone, but the thought of a child living like that, with no one to look after her, moved him deeply. "What's your name?" asked Henry, stepping forward. "Sam?" replied the boy, still cautiously. Henry looked around. The wooden shelter Sam had built was flimsy and clearly didn't offer enough protection from the cold or the rain. It was a miracle that the boy had survived there for so long. "Sam, you can't go on living like this," said Henry, trying to keep his voice firm but gentle. "Come with me. We'll go to my house. There you can have a bath, eat something hot, and rest." The boy frowned, suspicious. He looked Henry up and down, trying to decide whether to trust this strange man. There seemed to be no malice in his eyes, just a deep sadness that Sam somehow recognized. After a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, he finally nodded. Henry held out his hand, and with some hesitation, Sam accepted. The walk back to the mansion was silent, with the boy walking alongside Henry, never looking away from the ground. With every step he took, Henry felt he was making the right decision. Something about that boy had touched him in an inexplicable way, as if fate had put Sam in his path for a reason. When they arrived at the mansion, Sam was overwhelmed by what he saw. His eyes widened as he saw the grandeur of the house, so different from the precarious shelter in which he lived. "Is all this yours?" he asked, with a mixture of curiosity and incredulity. Henry smiled slightly. "Yeah, it's my house, but more important than being big, you'll be safe here." As they entered, Margaret, the housekeeper, was the first to see the boy. Her gaze, initially surprised, soon turned suspicious. "Mr. Henry," she began in a cautious voice, "who is this boy?" "This is Sam," replied Henry, casting a firm glance at Margaret. "I found him in the forest. He needs help, and he's staying with us." Margaret's expression didn't change. She knew Henry was a good-hearted man, but she was worried. The presence of a stranger, especially a boy from nowhere, seemed risky. "Are you sure this is wise, sir?" Margaret asked quietly, trying not to speak in front of Sam. "We don't know anything about him." Henry looked at Sam, who was motionless, watching the interaction between the two adults. The boy seemed to shrink away, as if he was waiting to be rejected. "Margaret," said Henry, in a serious tone, "he's just a boy. We can't leave him to his own devices. He's going to stay here." Unable to argue further, Margaret just sighed in resignation. "Very well, sir. I'll prepare a room for him." "Thank you, Margaret," Henry replied, and then turned to Sam. "Let's go upstairs. I'll show you where you can rest." As they climbed the stairs, Sam looked around, still impressed by the luxury of the mansion. To him, the place seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Never in his life had he seen something so grand, and now, suddenly, he was at the center of it all. Henry opened the door to one of the rooms and pointed to the bed. "That will be your room for now. There are clean clothes in the closet and a bathroom over there. Have a shower, then go down to the kitchen. Margaret will prepare something for you to eat." Sam entered the room slowly, as if he were treading on holy ground. He ran his hand over the soft bedspread, as if to make sure it was real. I've never slept in a place like this," he said, almost whispering to himself. Henry smiled again, feeling a lightness in his chest that he hadn't felt for a long time. There was something about Sam that made him feel useful again, as if taking care of that boy was more than just a good deed. It was almost as if fate was giving him another chance to save someone after everything he had lost. "You're safe now, Sam," said Henry before leaving the room. "Get some rest. We'll talk later." As Henry walked down the stairs, his heart felt a little lighter. He knew that Sam's presence could change a lot of things in the house. But for the first time in a long time, he felt there was a reason to feel optimistic. When Sam entered the mansion, he could hardly believe his eyes. The wide corridors with antique paintings, the gigantic chandelier hanging from the ceiling in the living room, the dark, polished wood furniture. Everything was a mixture of luxury and mystery that he had never imagined possible. It was as if he had been transported to a totally different world from the one in which he survived in the forest. The grandeur of the place left him speechless. Henry watched the boy with an attentive eye. He knew that for someone like Sam, the transition to a life inside that house wouldn't be easy. It wasn't just a question of material comfort. It was about accepting a new kind of life, trusting strangers and allowing yourself to believe that maybe the world could be kind. "You must be hungry, Sam. Let's go to the kitchen. I'm sure Margaret has prepared something for you," said Henry, trying to break the awkward silence that hung in the air. Sam just nodded and followed Henry down the corridors, still dazzled. As they entered the kitchen, a spacious and bright room, Margaret was standing there with her arms crossed and an indecipherable expression on her face. She still didn't seem convinced of the boy's presence in the house. "Margaret, is that what we have for dinner?" Henry asked, pointing to a steaming soup and fresh bread on the table. "Yes, sir. I've prepared something simple," she replied, casting a quick glance at Sam, who was looking at everything curiously. "Come, sit down," Henry said to the boy, pulling out a chair for him. Sam hesitated for a moment before sitting down. He picked up a spoon, but his movements were slow, as if he was still trying to process the situation. Henry noticed the discomfort and decided to ease the tension. "You know, when my son was younger, he loved this soup," Henry commented, helping himself to a portion. "It was his favorite food on cold winter nights." Sam looked at Henry, interested, but didn't say anything. Instead, he began to eat slowly, as if trying to get used to his surroundings. It was clear that he was hungry, but he was also fighting a feeling that this wasn't real, as if at any moment someone was going to wake him up and send him back to the forest. Margaret, watching the boy more carefully now, noticed the discreet way he looked around, and his eyes softened. Maybe he wasn't a problem after all. Maybe he was just a lost child who needed a second chance. "Eat as much as you want, Sam," said Margaret, finally approaching and breaking the ice. "If you need more, just ask." "Thanks," mumbled Sam, without looking directly at her, still concentrating on his food. After dinner, Henry took Sam to see the rest of the house. They walked through the corridors, passing elegantly decorated living rooms, a huge library and a music room that hadn't been used for years. Each new discovery seemed to impress Sam even more. "Do you live here alone with your granddaughter?" asked Sam, looking at a grand piano in the corner of the hall. "Yes, it's just the two of us. And Margaret, of course. The house used to be fuller, but now, well, things have changed," Henry replied with a melancholy tone in his voice. Sam felt the weight of those words. He knew what it was like to be alone, and somehow he realized that Henry also knew this feeling, despite all the wealth around him. After exploring the house, Henry took Sam to the room that would be his. It was a cozy room with a light wooden bed, blue curtains that swayed gently in the breeze coming through the window, and a desk where Sam could sit and write or draw if he wanted to. "This will be your room, Sam. Feel free to use it as you wish," said Henry, opening the door and watching the boy's reaction. Sam stood still for a moment, looking around cautiously. It was a very different room from anything he'd ever had. The bed felt incredibly soft, the clothes in the closet were new and clean, and everything smelled of fresh lavender. I've never had a place like this," said Sam, almost unable to believe his eyes. Henry smiled sadly. "Now you have." Sam walked slowly over to the bed, sitting down carefully, as if he feared it might disappear at any moment. He looked at Henry, not knowing what to say. There were so many questions in his mind, but he didn't know if it was right to ask. How could someone like Henry, with so much, care about a boy like him? "Why are you helping me?" Sam finally asked, his voice low but full of curiosity. Henry was silent for a moment, thinking about the answer. He knelt down in front of the boy, standing at the same height as him, and spoke sincerely. "Because I know what it's like to be lost, Sam, and I'm not going to let you face it alone." Sam stared at Henry, seeing something in the man's eyes that he hadn't expected. Honesty. For the first time in a long time, the boy felt that maybe there was someone he could trust. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow will be a new day," said Henry, getting up and walking towards the door. "If you need anything, I'll be around." After Henry left, Sam lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts were confused, but there was a new feeling growing inside him, something he almost didn't recognize: hope. As the silence settled in the house, Henry went downstairs, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced for years. Looking after Sam was awakening in him something he thought he had lost forever. Sam wasn't just a lost boy, he was a new opportunity for Henry to fill the void in his life. Margaret, who was clearing away the dishes in the kitchen, watched Henry as he passed, noticing the subtle change in his face. She still had her doubts, but she knew that Sam had brought something different to the house. Perhaps a chance for healing. For all of them. "Good evening, Margaret," Henry said with a slight smile that hadn't appeared on his face for a long time. "Good evening, Mr. Henry," she replied with a hint of hope in her voice. As the mansion sank into the silence of the night, Sam, in his new room, fell asleep feeling safe for the first time in a long time, unaware that from that moment on, his life would change forever. And somewhere inside that vast house, Henry also sensed that something was finally changing. The days at the mansion began to adjust to Sam's presence, who was no longer as shy in the corridors as before. Little by little, he felt more at ease in his new surroundings, even if he sometimes found himself doubting his own luck. Henry always stayed close by, trying to include him in the routine of the house, while Margaret, still a little suspicious, watched from afar, now with fewer reservations. One afternoon, when the sun was beginning to tint the sky with golden hues, Sam decided to explore the mansion more on his own. Although he had already walked through many of the rooms and corridors, there was always the feeling that some secret was still hidden in the old walls of the house. He went up to the top floor where the most rarely used rooms were. Between locked doors and furniture covered in sheets, a partially open drawer caught his eye. Approaching cautiously, Sam pulled it out slowly. Inside was a notebook with a worn cover, as if it had been used a long time ago, but then forgotten. Curious, he opened the notebook and saw that it was full of hand-drawn pictures. There were colorful scribbles and words scattered in small, delicate letters. On the very first page, the name written in childish handwriting caught his eye: Lily. Sam flipped through the pages, amazed at the talent of the person who had made it. He recognized the name immediately. It was Henry's granddaughter, the same girl he saw every day on the balcony, so distant and silent. The drawings told stories, or at least fragments of them. There were simple scenes like flowers in the garden or birds flying, but others showed something deeper. A little girl playing with a couple that Sam deduced were her parents. He had never seen Lily like this. It was hard to imagine that little girl, always so apathetic, with a smile on her face. Suddenly, Sam heard a voice behind him, breaking the silence of the moment. "What are you doing here?" It was Margaret, standing in the doorway with her hands on her hips, her stern gaze fixed on Sam. He held the diary tightly, as if he'd been caught doing something wrong. I just found this. It was here, forgotten," he said, showing the notebook, trying to look innocent. Margaret stepped forward, her eyes softening slightly when she saw what he was holding. "This belongs to Miss Lily. She used to draw all the time before everything changed. Can I have it?" Sam asked hesitantly, almost expecting a negative, but there was something in his eyes that made Margaret think. She sighed, her shoulders relaxing. "If you think you can do some good with it, go ahead." Sam didn't know exactly what this meant, but he put the diary away carefully, feeling that he was holding something much more important than it seemed. He had no idea how much that little notebook could change Lily's life, but something inside him told him that it might be the key to helping her remember. That evening, when Henry stopped by to say goodnight to Sam, the boy decided to tell him what he had found. "Mr. Henry," Sam began, taking a seat on the bed, "I found something today." Henry arched an eyebrow, curious. "And what was it, Sam?" "A diary. Lily's. There are lots of drawings of her and old things. I thought maybe I could show it to her. Maybe it could help her remember something." Henry's expression changed from curiosity to surprise. He hadn't expected Sam to find his granddaughter's diary, something he himself hadn't seen for years. For a moment, he hesitated. He knew how much that notebook represented the past that Lily had lost. and the fear of touching those memories was still not easy to overcome. "Do you think this could help?" Henry asked, more to himself than to Sam. "I think so," Sam replied firmly, holding the notebook as if it were a treasure. "If she sees the drawings, she might remember, or at least it could be a start." Henry looked into Sam's eyes and saw something he hadn't seen for a long time: hope. The boy believed he could make a difference, and maybe he was right. "All right," Henry said, sighing. "Show her tomorrow. We don't know what might happen, but we've got nothing to lose." The next morning, Sam went out to the balcony, where Lily spent most of her days, looking at the horizon, always so far away. He approached slowly, sat down next to her, and without saying a word, opened the diary on his knees. Lily at first paid no attention, continuing to stare into the void. "Lily," Sam called softly, showing her one of the drawings. "Look, you did it." Lily finally turned her eyes away from the horizon and looked at the paper. Her eyes roamed over the drawing, but her expression didn't change. There was no immediate recognition, but Sam didn't give up. He flipped through the pages, showing one drawing after another. There were flowers, birds, and scenes from a life that seemed as distant as a dream. "This one," he said, pointing to a portrait Lily had drawn of her parents. "You drew them." Lily stared at the drawing for longer than at the other pages. Her face remained serene, but something in her eyes seemed different. She raised her hand, hesitantly, and touched the paper lightly, as if trying to recall something that was right at the edge of her memory. "I know them," Lily murmured, her voice low, almost imperceptible. It was a small phrase, but for Sam and Henry, who were watching from a distance, it was a miracle. Sam felt his heart race. It was the first time Lily had shown any sign of remembrance since the accident. Although brief, that little glimpse of memory was a beacon of hope. Henry approached slowly, taking a seat next to the two of them. He looked at the drawing and then at Lily, who was still lost in thought, but now seemed more present. "Do you remember, darling?" Henry asked softly, his voice heavy with emotion. Lily didn't answer, but her eyes, which had once been empty, now seemed to be searching for something. Perhaps the memories were beginning to return, albeit slowly and in fragments. Sam, with the diary still in his hands, felt proud. He had made a difference. Perhaps, in time, Lily would be able to recover more parts of her life. And for the first time in a long time, the mansion, which had once seemed so full of sadness, began to fill with hope. After Lily's brief moment of remembrance, Henry and Sam continued to cling to the hope that she could recover more parts of her memory. It was a slow process, but that small breakthrough already meant a lot to both of them. Henry, who had previously seemed resigned to the idea that his granddaughter would never be the same again, now saw a light at the end of the tunnel. And Sam, determined to help, dedicated himself to spending more and more time with Lily. The days followed a new routine. Every morning, Sam picked up the diary and patiently showed Lily more pages. He would tell stories about the drawings, invent details where there weren't any, in the hope that something, anything, could bring back more memories. At first, she just stared at the drawings in silence, not showing much interest. But Sam wouldn't give up. One afternoon, while they were sitting in the garden, Sam flicked through the diary and found a special drawing. It was a simple scene with Lily playing on a seesaw next to her parents. The smile on the little girl's face in the drawing was contagious, and something about it seemed almost alive. "Lily, look at this one. That's you on the scales," said Sam, turning the diary so that she could see it. Lily, as always, looked at the drawing calmly, without much reaction. But this time, something seemed different. Her eyes lingered longer on the paper, and her breathing changed slightly, almost imperceptibly, but noticed by Sam, who was watching her intently. "You used to play outside a lot, didn't you?" Sam continued, trying to stimulate a reaction. "I bet that was your favorite game." Lily tilted her head, as if trying to pull up a memory lost in the back of her mind. After a long moment of silence, she finally spoke, her voice low and hesitant. I remember the scales." Sam almost couldn't believe his eyes. That little sentence was a huge breakthrough. He exchanged a quick glance with Henry, who was watching from a distance, and the old man smiled in a way he hadn't done for years. The joy on Henry's face was palpable, and he approached slowly, taking a seat next to his granddaughter. "Do you remember the scales, dear?" Henry asked, his voice laden with emotion. "You used to spend hours there, laughing and asking to go higher. Lily didn't say anything straight away, but there was a change in her expression. It was as if, for the first time, she was trying to pull up the memories on her own. She frowned slightly in concentration. "It was in the park," she said, her voice still soft, as if the words were fragile. "Mom and Dad, they were there." Henry felt a wave of emotion run through his body. This was more than he had ever expected. The mere fact that Lily had mentioned her parents was a miracle in itself. He held his granddaughter's hand gently, afraid of breaking that delicate moment. "Yes, they were. They loved watching you play," Henry said, his voice cracking slightly. He took a deep breath to keep calm. "You were so happy." Lily looked down at the floor as if trying to connect this new information with what was still left in her confused mind. There were no tears, but the weight of the memories seemed to afflict her in a way that no one could fully understand. Sam, sensing that the moment was right, put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Lily," he said, his voice firm but full of affection. "Your parents will always be with you, and so are we." Lily looked up at Sam and Henry. For the first time in a long time, there was a gleam of recognition in them. Maybe she still didn't remember everything, but now there was a connection, something that made her feel like she belonged there, in that family. "I know," she replied, almost inaudibly, but with a slight smile, the first Henry and Sam had seen since the accident. From that day on, Lily began to participate more in the daily activities of the house. It was still a long and slow journey, but every small victory was celebrated with gratitude. Sam kept showing her the drawings in the diary, and every time Lily remembered something, no matter how small, the atmosphere in the house changed. Henry, who once carried the weight of sadness on his shoulders, now found himself smiling more. The housekeeper, Margaret, who had been observing everything from afar, finally allowed herself to believe that Sam had really changed the lives of everyone in the mansion. One afternoon, as they walked through the garden, Henry looked at Sam with eyes full of gratitude. "You've done the impossible, Sam. I can't thank you enough for what you've done for her, and for me." Sam shook his head, embarrassed by the compliment. "I just wanted to help. She deserved it. You deserved it." Henry stopped walking for a moment, looking up at the sky above them. "You brought back something I thought I'd lost forever, and for that, I am eternally grateful." Sam didn't know how to respond. For him, helping Lily was the least he could do after everything Henry had done for him. But as he looked at the old man's emotional expression, he realized that he was doing much more than simply returning memories. He was helping to rebuild a family. As they walked back to the house, Sam looked at Lily, who was sitting on the swing they had recently installed in the garden. She was rocking slowly, her face calm, as if at peace for the first time in a long time. Henry stopped beside her, smiling. "Do you want to go higher?" he asked, repeating the same question he used to ask her when she was little. Lily looked at him and for the first time in a long time, gave an answer that filled Henry's heart with joy. "Yes," she said, smiling openly. And so Henry pushed the swing, with Sam watching closely, while Lily's soft laughter echoed through the garden. It was as if at last the shadows of tragedy had begun to dissipate, giving way to light and hope. The mansion, once silent and cold, was now a place of renewal and new memories, thanks to Sam's determination and Henry's unconditional love. And at that moment, everyone knew that, although the past could never be completely recovered, they had something even more precious: the present. After weeks of trying, something in the mansion finally changed. Lily's small breakthrough, her memories beginning to emerge like disconnected pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, brought a new atmosphere to the house. The heavy silence that used to hang over the corridors no longer seemed so oppressive. There was a new energy, a vibration of hope that spread through every room. Sam, who had initially been a stranger in the place, now felt part of something bigger. Henry, for his part, saw the boy with different eyes. He had been the key to unlocking something in Lily that no one, not even the doctors, had been able to. And that created a special bond between the two of them. One afternoon, while Sam was in the garden helping Margaret collect flowers, Henry called him in for a chat. They sat on the patio, the sun shining softly as a cool breeze blew through the trees. "Sam, I want to talk to you about something important," Henry began, his voice serious but with a touch of affection. Sam looked at him, not knowing what to expect, but sensing that it was something big. I know I've said this before, but you've really changed our lives, and I can't tell you how grateful I am," Henry continued. He looked at Sam with watery eyes, something the boy had never seen before. "You brought back my granddaughter, and you brought a bit of life back into this house." Sam was silent for a moment, feeling the weight of Henry's words. He had always known that what he was doing was important, but hearing it directly from the old man touched him deeply. "I just wanted to help," Sam said, his voice timid, as if he didn't want to take all the credit. "You gave me a home. I needed to do something." "But you did a lot more than that," Henry replied quickly. He paused, thinking of the right words. "Sam, I've been thinking, and I'd like you to stay here, not as a guest, but as part of our family." Sam's eyes widened, not believing what he had just heard. Part of the family, he who had always been alone, who had never known what it was like to have a real family, was now being offered something that seemed impossible. "Do you want to adopt me?" Sam asked, almost out of breath. "Yes," Henry replied with a gentle smile. "I want to be your legal guardian, to be for you what you need. A father, a grandfather, someone you can call family." Sam stared at the floor for a moment, feeling the emotions bubble up inside him. All his life, he had only known loneliness, living on the streets in makeshift shelters, always suspicious of others, never knowing what it was like to belong somewhere. Now, Henry was offering him everything he had ever wanted, even if he had never said it out loud. I don't know what to say," Sam mumbled, his eyes beginning to fill with tears that he tried to hold back. "You don't have to say anything now," Henry replied, putting his hand on Sam's shoulder. "I just want you to know that you don't have to worry about tomorrow anymore. From now on, you have a home, a family. You're welcome here, and you'll be treated like one of us." Sam couldn't hold back the tears any longer, and for the first time in a long time he cried. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness, fear, or despair. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of finally feeling safe. "Thank you, Mr. Henry. I never imagined anything like this could happen to me," Sam said between sobs. Henry leaned over and hugged Sam, a gesture that meant much more than words. For both of them, that hug symbolized the closing of a wound, the healing of something they each carried inside. Sam, the lonely boy, had finally found a family, and Henry, who had lost so much, now had a new reason to live. From that day on, the relationship between the two deepened. Henry began to teach Sam things he had never imagined he would learn, from how to look after the vast estate to the business that had sustained the family fortune for generations. More than that, Henry passed on to him values, stories about his life, about his son and daughter-in-law, and about the love he now felt for Sam. Lily, for her part, was increasingly connected to the world around her. She kept remembering little things, fragments of the past, and her personality slowly emerged again. Although she still wasn't the same girl as before, she was present, and that was more than Henry and Sam could ask for. One evening, while everyone was gathered in the living room, something magical happened. Lily, who was sitting quietly leafing through her old diary, looked at Sam and for the first time spoke directly to him, without hesitation. "Sam, are you going to be my brother?" she asked with a slight smile on her lips. Sam was surprised by the question, but smiled back, feeling a surge of emotion. "Yes," he replied, "if you want." Lily nodded as if finally understanding what was happening around her. She stood up and walked over to Sam, hugging him in a shy but sincere way. "I want to," she said softly. That moment cemented something bigger than either of them could have predicted. The house, once marked by pain and loss, was now full of life, new beginnings and unexpected love. Henry, Lily, Sam, and even Margaret, who now looked at the boy with affection and acceptance, formed a family. A family that, despite all the difficulties, was united. Henry, watching the scene, felt his heart fill with gratitude. He knew that the future would still bring challenges, but he also knew that together they could overcome anything. After all, they now had each other. Over time, the routine at the mansion became a new version of normality. Lily became more and more integrated, and Sam, who had once been a stranger, was now part of the family. Life went on, and the house, which had once been dominated by sadness, was now full of voices, laughter, and even the occasional mess that Sam and Lily made in the garden. One morning, Henry called Sam into his office, the place he always used to work and make important decisions about his business. The atmosphere was serious, with large shelves of books and the distinctive smell of leather from the old furniture. Sam, who now felt comfortable in the mansion, nevertheless felt a small twinge of nervousness as he entered the office. Henry was sitting behind the huge mahogany desk, looking at some papers. But when he saw Sam enter, he smiled. "Sam, have a seat. We need to talk about something important," said Henry, with a tone that indicated that the subject would be serious, but not frightening. Sam sat down in the chair facing him, watching him curiously. The boy knew that Henry had been planning something for some time, but he didn't know what. "You've been here with us for a few months now," Henry began, interlacing his fingers on the table. "And I've already made up my mind. As you know, I want to officially adopt you. But beyond that, I want to make sure you have a safe life and a promising future." Sam remained silent, trying to absorb everything Henry was saying. "I don't have anyone else," Henry continued, his voice heavy with emotion. "My son is gone, and the only family I have is Lily. And now you. That's why I want to share something with you, something that's important to our family." Sam watched him intently, sensing the gravity of the conversation. Henry took a deep breath and then opened a drawer in the desk, taking out a document which he placed in front of Sam. "This is my will," Henry explained with a firm but gentle tone. "I've already updated it to ensure that you and Lily are protected in the future. Part of my fortune will go to the two of you so that you'll never lack resources or support, no matter what happens to me." Sam's eyes widened. He had never imagined that something like this would be discussed with him. It was much more than he could have dreamed of. "I don't know what to say, Mr. Henry," said Sam, his voice breaking. "I never expected this." Henry smiled, leaning forward a little. "I don't expect you to understand all this now, Sam. You're still young, and I know that money has never been the most important thing for you. But I want you to know that, above all, what I'm offering you is security. A future that belongs to you just as it belongs to Lily." Sam remained silent, absorbing what Henry had said. He knew that this conversation wasn't about material goods. It was about trust, about family. Henry was giving him a future, something he could never have imagined before entering that house. "You've done so much for us," Henry continued, his voice low and sincere. "Now it's my turn to make sure you have everything you need to be happy." Sam felt his eyes water, but he took a deep breath, holding back the emotion. I'll never let you down, Mr. Henry. I promise I'll do my best." Henry got up from his chair and walked over to Sam, putting his hand on his shoulder. "I know you will, Sam, and you don't have to call me sir. From now on, we're officially family. You can just call me Henry. Or maybe one day, Grandpa." Sam smiled, surprised by the warmth of Henry's words. It was something he had never expected to hear in his entire life. The man who had taken him in now saw him as family, for real. "Thank you, Henry," said Sam, his voice firm but full of emotion. "I don't know how to repay you for everything you're doing for me." Henry smiled and sat back down behind the table. "You've already done so much more than you know, Sam. You've given us hope again. That's more valuable than any amount of money." That evening, over dinner, Henry shared the news with Lily and Margaret. Lily, who was increasingly present, smiled at Sam in a way that indicated that she finally saw him as part of that family. And Margaret, who had been so suspicious at first, now looked at Sam with a mixture of affection and respect. "I always knew there was something special about that boy," Margaret commented with a warm smile. "He's brought life back to this house." Henry agreed, raising his wine glass in a simple but meaningful toast. "To this new family," he said, looking at everyone around the table. "To this new family," repeated Sam, Lily, and even Margaret, raising their glasses in agreement. Over time, Sam began to feel truly part of that house, part of that story. He and Lily became inseparable. They spent hours in the garden, running, playing, and laughing, like siblings who had always known each other. Lily, who had previously been lost in her own mind, now seemed to be coming back to life. Sam helped her remember simple things, like childhood games and happy moments she had experienced. Henry watched with silent satisfaction. His life, which had once seemed empty and purposeless, was now full of color and joy. He knew that the future would still bring challenges, but with Sam and Lily by his side, he finally had something to fight for again. The adoption process was progressing, and Sam, who had once been a boy lost in the woods, was now about to officially become part of that family. The house, once silent and full of sadness, was now a place of hope and new beginnings. As the mansion lit up with new laughter and stories, Henry felt that, for the first time in years, his life was complete. Sam's adoption was finally made official in a simple but meaningful ceremony. In the courtroom, Henry, Sam, and Lily were present, side by side. Margaret, always present at important moments, was also watching with her eyes watering with emotion. The room was modest, with white walls and large windows that let in the soft morning light. There was an almost palpable tranquility in the air, as if everyone knew that something much bigger than papers and signatures was happening there. When the judge asked Henry for confirmation, he stood up, his voice firm but full of feeling. "Yes, I wish to adopt Sam. He is part of our family, and this formality only confirms what we all already know in our hearts." Sam stood next to him, dressed in more formal clothes than usual. He looked at Henry with gratitude and nervousness. It was hard to believe that this moment, something he had never dreamed possible, was actually happening. He would now have a family, a stable life, and people who truly cared about him. The judge, a serious man but with a slight smile on his lips, looked at Sam and asked the question everyone had been waiting for. "Sam, do you wish to be officially adopted by Henry? Are you ready to be part of this family?" Sam looked at Henry and then at Lily, who was standing next to him, watching with shining eyes. He felt a wave of emotions run through his body, but the answer was already clear in his heart. "Yes," he said, his voice a little shaky but full of determination. "I want to be part of this family." With that, the judge made the final signature and declared the adoption official. From that moment on, Sam was no longer just a lost boy Henry had found in the woods. He was now officially part of the family. As soon as they left the courtroom, Henry put a hand on Sam's shoulder and looked at him with a pride he couldn't hide. "Welcome officially to the family, Sam," said Henry with a warm smile. Sam smiled back, still trying to process what had just happened. "Thank you, Henry. I mean, Grandpa," he corrected himself, hesitantly, but with a smile on his lips. Henry laughed, touched. "You can call me whatever you want, kid. The important thing is that we're officially family now." Lily, who was standing next to him, pulled Sam by the arm. "That means you're my real brother now," she said with a sparkle in her eyes that hadn't been seen for a long time. Sam nodded, feeling an even deeper connection with her. "Yes, we're brothers," he replied, and they both laughed, as if they had known this all along. The ride back to the mansion was full of animated conversations. Margaret, who was waiting for them at home, had prepared a special dinner to celebrate the adoption. When everyone sat down at the table that evening, the atmosphere was one of pure happiness. There was no longer the heavy silence that used to hang over the house. Now it was all laughter, stories, and smiles. During dinner, Henry stood up again to make a toast. "To Sam, the newest member of our family," he began, raising his glass, "and to Lily, who has also found her way back to us. This is a new beginning for all of us." Everyone toasted, and Sam, for the first time, felt truly at home. The feeling of belonging, of finally being part of something bigger, enveloped him in a way he had never imagined possible. As the evening progressed and dinner turned into long, relaxed conversations, Sam observed the scene around him. The mansion, which had once seemed so imposing and cold, now radiated warmth and joy. After dinner, Sam went to the room that was now officially his, feeling a peace he had never experienced before. The house was silent, but it was no longer the oppressive silence he had once known. Now it was a silence of serenity, of security. He lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, remembering how his life had changed since the day Henry had found him in the forest. It was almost impossible to believe the journey he had been on. As he closed his eyes, he felt that everything was in the right place. He had a family, a sister, and above all, someone who believed in him. Now he was no longer alone in the world. The next morning, life went on with its new routine. Henry continued to teach Sam about the family business, wanting to ensure that the boy had the necessary tools to have a prosperous future. Sam was always eager to learn, absorbing every lesson Henry gave him, and, in return, he brought joy and vitality to the old man, who, after so long of sadness, had finally found a purpose again. Lily, for her part, continued to recover. She and Sam spent long periods together, laughing and playing in the garden, talking about things from the past and imagining what the future held for them. Sam, now officially Lily's brother, helped her to rediscover her memories, but more importantly, to create new ones. Even Margaret, who had once worried about Sam's presence in the mansion, now treated him with affection. She saw him as a new lease of life in the house, and knew that he had brought something essential to all of them, the chance to start again. From that moment on, the mansion, once silent and full of sadness, became a place of light, love, and hope. Life went on, but now with a joy that no one there ever thought would return. Sam had found a family, and Henry, Lily, and Margaret had found something they thought they had lost forever, a sense of belonging and renewal. And so the house, which had once been a symbol of loneliness, became a real home, full of laughter, stories, and above all, love. The days passed, and little by little, the mansion that had once been marked by sadness and loneliness was transformed into a home full of life. Sam was now officially part of the family, and Lily was recovering more fragments of her former self every day. The full memories might never come back, but that didn't matter so much anymore. What everyone there had gained was something greater, a new chance at happiness. One morning, as the sun shone through the mansion's large windows, Henry watched Sam and Lily playing in the garden from the balcony. They were running between the trees, laughing and having fun, like two children who had finally found freedom. Henry, sitting in a rocking chair, felt his heart fill with peace. It had been a long time since he had felt this tranquility, and now, seeing Sam and Lily so united, he knew that, despite the losses and pain of the past, life had given him a new chance. Margaret appeared with a tray of tea and placed it on the table next to Henry, smiling softly when she saw the joy on her boss's face. "It's nice to see them so happy, isn't it?" she commented, pouring the tea delicately. Henry nodded without taking his eyes off the children. "Yes, it is. They bring a new light into this house, something I never thought I'd feel again." Margaret sat down next to him, something she didn't do often. Although she was the housekeeper, she had long since become more than that. She was a loyal friend, a mother figure to everyone in the house. Henry knew that she, like him, also felt the weight of the transformation that had taken place. "Sam is a good boy," she said, her voice laden with affection. "He brought hope to all of us." "He's done more than that, Margaret," replied Henry with a slight smile. "He gave us a new lease of life." As Sam and Lily ran around the garden, laughing and shouting with the innocent joy of someone who finally felt at home, Henry got up from his chair, feeling that this moment deserved something more. He walked slowly down the stairs and into the garden, where the children were. "You two," called Henry, trying to disguise the smile that was already forming on his lips. "What do you say we take a walk into town? It's been a while since we've been out together." Lily, her eyes sparkling, ran up to her grandfather, excited. "Can we go to the park, Grandpa? Can we play on the swing?" Henry smiled, remembering how the swing had been an important part of his progress. "Of course, dear. We can do whatever you want." Sam approached with a shy smile, but full of enthusiasm. "It'll be fun," he said, looking at Henry with an admiration that was beyond words. "I've never had a family to do these things with before." Henry looked at Sam, feeling a wave of emotion run through his body. "Now you have," he replied, putting his hand on Sam's shoulder. "And we're going to enjoy every moment of it." On the way into town, the trio seemed like a real family. Henry drove the car calmly, while Sam and Lily chatted animatedly in the back seat, planning what they would do in the park. Laughter filled the car, creating such a light atmosphere that it was hard to believe that, just a short time ago, this very house and these very people were immersed in pain. Arriving at the park, Lily ran ahead, eager to reach the swing. Sam followed close behind, and Henry, grinning from ear to ear, walked slowly, enjoying the sight of his two grandchildren, now officially his grandchildren, sharing the joy of a simple moment. When Lily finally sat down on the swing, she looked at Henry with the same smile he hadn't seen since she was a little girl. "Can you push me, Grandpa?" Henry nodded, thrilled. He began to push the swing slowly while Sam watched, laughing and encouraging Lily to go higher. That, for Henry, was a small miracle. He knew that life would never be the same after the accident, but moments like that showed that even in the midst of pain, it was still possible to find happiness. "Higher, Grandpa!" Lily shouted, laughing. And Henry pushed a little harder, and the sound of her laughter filled the air. Sam, watching everything, smiled at Henry, a smile that said more than any words could express. He knew how much that moment meant to all of them. At the end of the day, as the sun began to set, the trio returned home, exhausted but lighthearted. The mansion, which had once seemed imposing and cold, was now a home, a place where love, hope, and joy flourished again. Even Margaret, who was waiting for them with a hot meal and a warm smile, seemed different, more open and willing to share in these new moments. As night fell and everyone got ready for bed, Sam spent a few moments in his room, reflecting on everything that had happened. He was no longer that lost, frightened boy who lived alone in the woods. Now he had a family. He had a grandfather who loved him, a sister with whom he shared his joys, and even a governess who, over time, had become a protective and affectionate figure. Henry, for his part, looked out of his bedroom window before going to sleep, seeing the soft lights of the mansion illuminating the garden. He smiled, feeling complete in a way he hadn't since the loss of his son and daughter-in-law. Now he had a new family, built in unexpected but no less meaningful ways. That night, the mansion, which had once been marked by silence and sadness, was full of life, full of love. And everyone there knew that although the past could never be completely erased, the future was full of new possibilities. Sam, Lily, Henry, and even Margaret, each in their own way, had found a new beginning. And so the once gloomy home now shone with light and hope, a symbol that even in the most difficult circumstances, there is always room for love and renewal. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more stories like this one, we have prepared the next video just for you. Click here to watch.